I just got a copy of The Body Press from March 30th, 1974 in Detroit. Listen to this lineup. Listen to this show. This is ridiculous. This is just an average show. The opening match, a gigantic 20-man battle royal. Each contestant puts up $500. The winner is the last man standing. He collects $10,000. That's the opening match.
Opening match.
Aztec Joe from Mexico City versus New Zealand's own Bobby Heenan.
What did Bobby Heenan was from New Zealand? What?
It says New Zealand, 240 pounds.
Oh, good Lord.
Little Louie and Bobo Johnson will take on Little Bruiser and Little Tokyo in a midget tag team match. Following that, the Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Don Kent, versus Pepper Gomez and Billy Red Lyons. After that, we have George Crybaby Cannon versus Jacques Rougeau.
Senior, of course.
Kabuki versus Irish Mickey Doyle. Who's Kabuki in Detroit at this time?
That was Kabuki, and it was spelled K-A-B-O-O-K-I, correct?
Yes.
What was his name? Oh gosh. And it's escaping me. It's on the tip of my tongue, and a lot of the Cult of Cornette members, Supermouth Dave Drayson, is going to be ashamed of me. What was the guy? I can't remember the guy's name now. That was Kabuki, but it was not the great Kabuki. It was an earlier, just a Japanese kind of generic Kabuki gimmick.
I will say, though, there was a picture of him in here, and it certainly does cut a little bit into the argument that Gary Hart just came up with the idea randomly on an airplane, reading National Geographic or whatever.
No, there had been, and there had also been a Kabuki in England to a lesser extent that wasn't made up as generically as Kabuki-ish as this Kabuki in Detroit was. And God damn it, I can't remember his name. That's going to haunt me.
Tag team action, Raymond Rougeau, spelled here Ramon, R-A-M-O-N, Ramon Rougeau, and Billy Five, whoever that is, versus Hank James and Wild Bull Curry.
And Hank James, of course, was the brother of Bobo Brazil.
And then for the World's Heavyweight Tag Team Championship, Kurt Von Hess and Carl Von Schatz, managed by George Cannon, versus Sonny King and Louis Martinez.
Arriba!
Ben Justice versus Bobo Brazil, Pampero Firpo versus Killer Tim Brooks, and in the main event for the United States Championship, The Sheik versus the Mighty Igor. March 30th, 1974, Olympia Stadium.
That was, as a matter of fact, I'm surprised they were in the Olympia instead of the Cobo. That was it not during the promotional war, which was still going on, where Bruiser was running the Olympia? That lasted from sometime in 72 to sometime in 74. And Bruiser was running the Olympia with his guys from Indianapolis. Again, that's why the Sheik was loading up those cards. All those Cobo Arena cards in the early 70s had every major name in the NWA and the Midwest territories, and they had 10, 12, 14 matches or 20-man battle royals opening the card or whatever the case, because they were in the middle of that promotional war, and he was trying to blow them out, and he got support from a lot of the NWA territories. But Bruiser was, as Dave Drayson mentioned not long ago on the Experience, Sheik would draw 10, 11,000 people twice a month, every show, and Bruiser was still, he started out strong, I think like 8 or 9, 10,000, but he was still drawing, 3 or 4, 5,000 across town. So for a while, Detroit was selling more live event wrestling tickets than any other city in the country.
Coming next week, April 13th at the Cobo, making his debut, 460 pounds of successful pro wrestler, Chris Taylor.
Yeah, Chris didn't work out. Thank goodness Patera made it. Poor Chris Taylor didn't work out.
There's one article here at the end that I did get a little kick out of. I'll read you the opening paragraph. It is The Sheik Disposes of Opponents in and Out of the Ring by Dave Brzezinski.
I wonder who that could be.
This guy writes in a very interesting way. A professional wrestler must at all times keep his body in top physical shape, exercise regularly, and eat the proper foods which are most important. Your everyday wrestler's diet may consist of plenty of meat and protein. But would you believe wood pulp, paper, and ink? In the case of the Sheik, it is his favorite specialty. He thrives on 8x10 glossy photographs of Bobo Brazil, Pampero Firpo, Tony Marino, Fred Curry, Igor, and many more. It doesn't make any difference whether it is black and white or color. How about that?
Yep. And the Sheik, he would come out, he would do the interviews, and he would eat or set on fire, depending on the situation, the pictures of his hated opponents. And of course, they were the same ones that were available at the souvenir stand. You know, the Sheik can't stand it, folks, when you have these pictures. And it was a different time.
What do you know about the TV stations they have listed on the back of this program? Because I'm sure you have some of these, because obviously
I actually have a huge late 60s, early 70s body press collection from Kobo that me and Bobby, and I ended up getting some of those that Bobby Fulton got back from him in later years, but we bought a bunch of Gary Kamensack's old body presses and the guys that, you know, that I was talking about, and of course Dave Brzezinski and so the guys that used to hang out and do the photography and programs at the Kobo years ago that you know, they had their own wrestling community there, and they're still, you know, they still hang out with each other today. I did that last year with them in Detroit, but I loved those programs because they were sturdier than most of the other territories.
Oh yeah.
And plus they had the actual lineups, you know, for the show rather than just being a generic program. And they're very cool.
Not just a lineup, but little boxes to check who won the matches, which is really
good. X the losers and check the winners.
But like these television listings, did the Sheik take over Pedro Martinez's time spot? Well, actually, I shouldn't even say that, because obviously the Michigan spots are his, but there's TV listed in Alaska, Hawaii, Indiana, Missouri, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, and Canada. The New York ones are upstate. That's what made me think Pedro Martinez. But, you know, Hawaii, I guess these are just the Hawaiian promotions television shows. But well,
actually, think about this. Sheik, being one of the highest paid wrestlers in the world and a rich promoter and also in demand in Japan about that time, where did the guys stop whenever they went to Japan? They went to Hawaii, and they would either work there for the local promotion, whether it be 50th State Wrestling or later on Lee Maivia or whoever it may be, on the way there or back. And I can believe that they either made some kind of deal, because Sheik worked a lot of those big mega shows. They probably made some kind of deal to send his tape out there, or potentially he was counting that as, some Hawaii fan write in. Maybe he was counting that because some of his tapes that were sent out, because remember, they used tapes a lot in Hawaii from all the different stars that would come in. So that may have been that. What station is listed in Indiana?
Indiana is Fort Wayne and Indianapolis.
But does it give the specific station?
Yeah, in Indianapolis, WISH TV 8.
Yes, because Bruiser was on WTTV Channel 4 out of Bloomington, which is the station I used to be able to get, but he also had another run on Channel 6. What was Channel 6's call letters? Was it WRTV? I don't know. So anyway, when Sheik got TV to fuck with Bruiser in Indianapolis, but as far as I know, never actually ran live events against him in Indy. At least I never heard about him and have never seen clippings or ads for him. But he got TV down there, and Fort Wayne was another of Bruiser's markets, and he may have even run there, but he was trying to, you know, to get a foothold to run back, I think maybe, which is possibly why that they settled it in 74, where Bruiser said, all right, just don't come down here and I'll leave Detroit.
When did Wrestling at the Chase air?
When, as far as what time of day or what? God, that's a good, somebody call Larry Matizik. I can't remember off the top of my head, and I can't reach my programs.
Because Sheik has listed here TV in St. Louis on Channel 30 WDNL, Saturdays from 5 to 6 p.m.
That, well, obviously, St. Louis Wrestling at the Chase at that point was still on Channel 11, right?
Yeah.
The major station. So I doubt very seriously they would have run against them. But that was an independent station, I think, at that time, 30. That once again, maybe Sheik was getting TV in St. Louis because Sam Muchnick was still very loyal and still used Bruiser. Well, no, he didn't use him during that period of time. He was on the outs. He was still good friends. But he even didn't use Bruiser, I don't think, in St. Louis when Bruiser was going opposite another member of the NWA out of principle.
Of all the cities to put that Detroit wrestling show in, St. Louis.
Boy, talk about, you know what, that kind of thing, that may have been to put pressure on Sam Muchnick to get Bruiser to pull out of Detroit, because the Chic show, let's face it, with snakes and juice and chaos and kind of hokey angles in the studio in some cases would have probably have driven Sam Muchnick to have nightmares in being seen in his town. I've told you the story about when Jerry Jarrett tried to get TV in Cincinnati, didn't I?
I'm not sure.
It was Chic had folded up a couple of years before. This was 1980, and Jerry Jarrett was since Cincinnati's only 90 miles up the road from Louisville, and there sat Cincinnati Gardens, famous wrestling arena. Jerry Jarrett had been trying to get TV in Cincinnati. And he went to one station, I believe it was probably Channel 5, because the Sheik was on Channel 5 there for years, or Channel 19, because he was on there for years also, and WXIX. And the station manager said, "Come here a second." And they went back in the office, and he took a tape off of his shelf, and he put it in the, early days they had, well, it was a TV station. He had a 3/4 machine. And he showed them a tape of the Chic studio show from a few years before. And at one time, like in the late 70s, Channel 5, one of the biggest stations in Cincinnati, had put them on like at 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday nights. I think this may have been Channel 5. He said, "This is why wrestling will never be on my television station." And there's the Chic. He's got the job guy bent over the fucking rope, and the camera's kind of close up, and he's got the pencil or whatever, but he's obviously takes a razor blade and just cuts the fucking guy. No, it was while he had the snake. He's got the snake held to the guy's head, but he's got a razor blade in the other hand just cutting the guy. And the guy said, "I don't want wrestling on my TV station." But then Jarrett finally got it. I can't remember what station he got, but he unfortunately right then, as I think it's pretty much as soon as the agreement had been made, Lawler broke his leg. And so they debuted, and they ran 12 weeks of the TV from Memphis TV with no Jerry Lawler, and where they were still trying to figure out what was going to go on and kind of making it up as they went along, and ran one show in the Cincinnati Gardens. And I know the Garden seats 12,000 because we sold it out once, Midnight in a Rock and Roll. And I think there was about 450 people there. And they never went back to the Cincinnati Gardens. It was poor timing. And then Crockett got it like a year and a half later, and boom, with Piper and Snuka and Orndorff and Stevens and Superstar and Jesus H. Christ, and they were selling out pretty much instantly.
I recently had someone bring something up to me. It's an interesting concept I had never thought of. I somewhat dismissed, but then I actually said, "Oh, I should think about it." We all know about UWF, Mid-South Wrestling, going out of business, and a large part of that was because of the economy in Texas, in Oklahoma, in Louisiana, taking that big hit at that point in the 80s. We all look at Detroit and we say, well, the Sheik's TV was horrible. The Sheik's booking was the same thing year in and year out, or the people got sick of the Sheik. Naturally, the territory died. Should we take a closer look at the actual economy in Michigan and the auto industry at that same time, and maybe change the way we perceive the success or lack of success in later years of the Sheik's promotion?
Well, and maybe Mr. Super Genius over there, you could get on the internet and figure out, when did the economy in Detroit start its nosedive? Because that's one of the reasons why the Sheik took Michigan as a territory. He obviously was from Lansing. He got to be a star on the early network television, the Sheik of Araby. And became a hot heel and made enough money and went home like all the other top guys did and bought into or took over. Actually, he bought. Barnett always said the Sheik paid him, but he got to be a big enough local star in the Midwest and especially in his home state that he was able to buy the promotion in the early 60s, and through the 60s into the early 70s. Detroit's a joke now, kind of, to a lot of people, like, oh, you need to go to Detroit. It was one of the most successful economic booming cities and one of the bigger cities in America. And it's one of those, it's lost population. It's probably half the population of Detroit now that it once was. And the whole economy also, everything went to shit. Sheik's territory, Sheik was, all those things you said was true. It wasn't a real good television show, but his personality was so strong when he was young and when he had access to all those stars, and just it was the thing to do. But then when he got old and the war was over and he couldn't get stars he used to and the houses all started going down and it kind of fed on itself, it Bruiser's territory, Indianapolis's economy didn't really fall apart, I don't think, but the same thing happened at pretty much the same period of time after their war. And so, but at the same time, it probably didn't help the matters that Detroit's economy was going south. But then again, in the 80s, when Georgia opened up, pretty much most of Sheik's territory started in Columbus because of the cable, and they opened up all of Ohio, and they went to Saginaw and Lansing and Grand Rapids. Even they, until Crockett took over in the late 80s, never went to Detroit. It was probably more expensive there than any place in the state. And even though the reward was greater, it was harder to draw there until finally, Crockett could take the gamble with it. And the first time that we went in 87 did $100,000. I think that was the night Garvin won the belt from Flair, right?
87.
Yeah. So, but it had been almost 10 years since they'd had major league, big name pro wrestling in Detroit at that point. The rest of the state, yes, but they never really cracked Detroit again. So when did Detroit's car industry go downhill?
I would have to look and get a firm thing, but I know,
why don't we ask somebody out there is in the car business? One of the Cult of Cornette members needs to tweet us where the fuck or when the fuck the auto industry went to shit in Detroit and everything started going downhill.